Coming up on the Daily AI Show.
Nvidia, which is a major player in the world of AI, is focusing now on robotics.
It's a huge model. It's 671 billion parameter architecture.
It's low cost for developing. It's also fairly low to run.
Agency evolves on a continuous spectrum as you give more or less power to the LLM on your workflow.
Good morning, everyone. Aloha and welcome to the Daily AI Show. It's Wednesday, and that means it's Newsday. It is January 1st, 2025. I always get that wrong on the checks, but let's see how long it takes me to switch over. Today, I am joined by Beth, Brian, and Andy, and I am Junmei, and we're going to try and cover all of the most exciting or most important news that we feel that everyone should be knowing and talking about. I'm going to open up with my classic AI and science bit, because I thought this was really, really cool and definitely taking us into the sci-fi realm with Osaka University coming out with Crossing the Uncanny Valley, breakthrough in technology for lifelike facial expressions in androids. So this study that they did in Osaka University addresses the Uncanny Valley. And if you're not familiar, the Uncanny Valley is essentially that point where people look at something, particularly another person, and just something is unusual to them. It's either too real or becomes surreal. Something just doesn't fit right, and some people can get unease from this. Some people are just like, you missed the mark a little bit. And so one of the big reasons for this is the expression of emotions in whatever it is, their face, right? Whether it's an avatar, a robot, or simply an animation or whatnot to replicate human emotions. And so one component of that is the ability to seamlessly switch between emotional states and to reflect internal emotional states, right? It's easy enough to program a robot to open their eyes wide or their mouth, to do those kinds of static expressions, but it's very difficult to have those natural transitions and reflect what your internal processes are, right? Humans do it naturally. They have learned to express themselves the majority of the time fairly easily. And so what this group from Osaka University has done is they've applied waveforms for those different emotional states. So states like excited or sleepy or anything like that. And they're able to synthesize those facial movements and in between those facial movements by using superimposed decaying waves, which provides a much more natural process for switching between those or having a constant state that can be expressed, right? This has been that crux or hill that roboticists have been trying to overcome. And so with this new study, by using waveforms, this allows for that gradual change and that constant state as well, without having to require a huge amount of processing and pre-programming and all of those kinds of things. So really interesting in showing that bridge between human and computer is shortening, right? And particularly with the concept of androids. We love those examples from, science fiction and things like that. But this should help a lot in that human-computer interface, or HCI, in terms of being able to work with, right? And that's one of the things that we've seen a lot of work is how humans and robots can work together without it being dangerous and productive and all those kinds of things. So that's the first one I wanted to bring up. I thought it was really, really cool. Just came across, my feed yesterday while looking for stories, and I was like, "Oh, this is a great opener." I'm hoping that we will see androids in the future. Let's just hope it's a positive experience, not like majority of our movies say it's not.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
Did it say, or did you say, and I missed it, what the waveform is? Right? Is it light or is it sound? I don't know what other things make wave.
Oh,
Andy's going to come on and talk to me about physics. No?
right.
Is everything a waveform until it's a graph?
I mean, if you want to break it down to the particle and wave expression of energy and radiation and various forms, sound is one of those things. Light is another one of those things. But it's more of I think what they're drawing more from is the fact that it is a waveform, and you can see waveforms expressed in all forms of energy, communication, all those kinds of things. But this is more, I guess they're focusing on how it decays is a much more natural and
that makes sense.
In sync with how it can be expressed in the human face or human emotions and things like that. So that decaying wave function is less of the Uncanny Valley. So it's trying to cross it without people going, "Oh, wait, something's weird about that." Cool. All right. So who's got their itch?
You have a weave off of that one because we're talking robotics here.
All right.
Yeah. So one of the items in the news is that Nvidia, which is a major player in the world of AI, is focusing now on robotics. And I'm not saying to the exclusion of building GPUs and gaming systems. And recently we heard the announcement about their $249 Jetson Nano computer, but they launched in the last week, they launched a new small computer called Jetson Thor. And that's going to be used to power humanoid robots. NVIDIA is not going to build robots themselves, but they're building the computer that will sit inside the robot and enable AI for all robot makers worldwide is their intention. Building basically a device that's going to be core technology in humanoid robots.
That's
and Beth, I don't have a comment on the duality of wave and particle physics. So
I like Beth's been joined by her co-host. Hi, puppy. Okay, sorry. I just had a squirrel moment there. But Andy, yeah, I find that really interesting because they had announced sometime either early 2024 or whenever they had their NVIDIA event. I believe that was early 2024, where they talked about all of their systems and frameworks that they were putting in place to help develop the AI software side of things, right? And so they did mention part of that as being the robotics arm. So this looks like it's a hardware core to whatever robotics you want to develop and things like that. I think that's awesome. Brian, do you have a story that you really wanted to talk about this morning?
Well, just because Andy mentioned Nvidia, I'll say that they just finally finished their acquisition of Run AI, which was something they announced way back in April, and we probably talked about on the show. But it ran into all sorts of regulatory hurdles in Europe and other places, and investigations were done. Well, that's all passed now, and Nvidia has finalized its acquisition of, I think it's an Israeli-based company, Run AI. So it has to do with infrastructure and different things like that. I have to go back and look more into it, but it was an acquisition they did, and so now Run AI will be merged into, what they're doing at Nvidia. So just interesting stuff there, and also a reminder of how long some of these actual acquisitions, when we read about them in the news, this was something that was announced, like I said, back in April, and so that's 8 months to get through all the necessary hurdles and things like that to actually get to the acquisition. Of course, a lot of them don't go through as well. They fail for all sorts of reasons, So just wanted to bring that up since Andy brought up Nvidia.
I have a weave bridge to a China story that I know somebody's going to talk about, and that is that ByteDance intends to spend $7 billion on Nvidia chips in 2025. But what makes this a very interesting story is that ByteDance is restricted from using Nvidia chips, Nvidia being a US company, subject to sanctions against Nvidia giving chips to ByteDance, but they're getting around that sanction by putting the data centers outside the US. So these outside the US data centers can use Nvidia chips. I don't know how that gets around the sanctions, but it does. And there are other stories that I'm sure. Beth, I'm gonna leave you to do DeepSeek if you're ready to do it. That show that China is responding to the sanctions with the same way that the human body responds to limited resources, and that is with innovation and amazing twists and turns and spins and pivots that get them where they need to get, even despite the restricted resources.
That's an interesting take. The purpose, I believe, of restricting or sanctioning the exporting of GPUs and chips to China was to slow their AI development, but may have inadvertently created a more lean and better and more cost-effective AI field there than we have here. Yeah, so it's like, well, you didn't, you didn't solve the problem. You just exacerbated. I'm not going to even try and say the word now. It's too early in the morning. But yes, unless anyone has another story, I have a couple small ones, but DeepSeek is the big topic for today. Beth, you want to lead us off on that?
Okay, so DeepSeek was dropped in like the Christmas week, right? Or like right before it. And it's a huge model. It's 671 billion parameter architecture. And as Andy mentioned on a previous show, it is a mixture of expert model, but it has some massive number. And I'm sorry, I'm looking for it and I can't find the actual thing, but it's like 260 something. There's some there are a bunch of experts. And the model then it's super efficient in terms of the energy that it uses, because it only lights up the sections of the models of the mixture of experts that are relevant. I apologize. That's just what this today is going to be.
That's selective activation, and on any inference token, it activates only about 5 to 6% of the available parameters for that particular prediction.
And the other thing that's really exciting about it is we talk about that the current large language models are next token prediction, right? So they're just predicting the next most likely token within weights and context and all of that. Well, this is a multi-token prediction model. So it's capable of doing faster inference, faster text generation. And we're starting to see that be talked about in the other models as well that are coming out. The other thing that was exciting about this is that people have talked about the gap between the frontier closed community, which of course is OpenAI, because everything is ironic, and the time it takes for the open source community to come out with something comparable. So OpenAI just announced O3, but didn't even come out with it. And this model surpasses what's available, which is O1 and 4.0. Those were the ones it tested against, I believe. So that is super interesting. China did a bunch this week, and I'm just having that experience of did more secular or Christian-based companies take like 2 weeks off, and China was like, "Oh, not us, guys. Like, we're good."
Let me add a couple more things about DeepSeek v3. What's remarkable, in addition to what Beth was mentioning, is that the training cost of this model was let's express it as a percent, 9% of the compute used to train Llama 3.1, 405 billion. This is a slightly larger model at 671 billion parameters. But they used H800 GPUs. This is an older model GPU. And the model was trained, for only $5 million, whereas the ones that it's matching or surpassing, as Beth says, those state-of-the-art non-reasoning models such as 4.0 and 3.5 Sonnet, those models cost, huge budgets in order to actually produce the same result. And then there's one other little twist that I thought was interesting. And by the way, that's to the point of, hey, go ahead, cut us off from your best GPUs. We're going to figure out engineering workarounds that will make it possible for us to meet or exceed your capabilities with better, more efficient, results. And by the way, when you run this model, it costs about 1/10 what it costs to run 4.0. Okay, so major advances, and that's why there's so much interest around DeepSeek v3 right now. But one of the things that
only 4.0, right? It costs like it's so far down the cost compared to the capability.
That's right. It's cost 1/10 as much. Like, so if it cost you 10 cents to do a run on 4.0, it costs you 1 cent to do it on DeepSeek v3. Okay. So the other thing is that this model, it's an open source model, so anybody can build with it. And what it does is it promises businesses who want to have a very advanced model, and of course they'll achieve reasoning with this technology as well. You'll be able to build on top of something that's very inexpensive to run compared to what is happening with O3, right? And you're going to have to pay $2,000 a month now for a special thing. And if you want O3 from OpenAI to think longer, it's going to cost 1,000-fold what it would cost to do it with DeepSeek v3. Okay, so where's the money coming from? Doesn't this imply a real crimp on the revenue models for the people who have been investing huge sums? Yeah, it does. And why? It was driven by our restricting their availability to GPUs. But here's an interesting twist. This model, when you're prompting it, sometimes identifies itself as ChatGPT.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And so the speculation is that it, like many other models, is probably using ChatGPT outputs as part of its training.
Right. Because it anything that you're going to see flood the internet is going to get into your next data set, right? However it's updated. Because I was reading an article on that too, where other models have had similar types of hallucinations as well. Like I believe Gemini did it for a little while. And so we can see sort of that concept of the snake eating its tail kind of deal. So that definitely requires some sort of fine tuning, right? To kind of work that out. And I was thinking, if you have such a cheap open source model to work with, this is where we start using Sakana. I just love the concept of that model they came up with, is because it's like, oh, here's a good base, but there's obvious problems, right? Because of its predicting, it's calling its self ChatGPT, or it can't it can't answer certain questions, like we were talking about before the show with Brian, or it just says it can't answer those things. Well, if you're worried about a gap in the information, let's just slap another model we know is trained in these ways, and we come up with a new evolution. I mean, it really is like Pokemon. So, but one of the other things that I wanted to touch upon, because of its low cost for developing, it's also fairly low to run because of that nature of using only 5% of what's needed for any request. That puts it into a much closer realm for running it at home, closer to what you would do in high-end hardware. So I did a little digging, and of course, their paper suggests these are the kinds of metrics that we can get on H200s and a collection of A100 Nvidia chips, right? These are the big name GPUs in AI compute. And what they're talking about in speed now, the new term is tokens per second, or TPS, right? A lot of factors go into calculating what the TPS rate is, but DeepSeek V3 is supposed to be able to do 60 tokens per second, which is supposed to be comparable with Claude 3.5 and is a little faster than GPT-4, right, in terms of processing those tokens. Now, to get these kinds of speeds, we do need that level of hardware. But with the advent of new hardware clusters and more affordable things, particularly the M4 Mac Mini, because we've seen some fairly popular posts and people showing how they're building small clusters and things like that. With a cluster of 8, you can get nearly 6 tokens per second. All right. And so that for just a relatively small cluster that you could technically afford to put into your home, you can get a tenth of what the full speed is, right? Of someone using it in these major data centers and things like that. And so I did a little bit of calculation. Of course, there's a few more factors, super broad strokes, so don't come at me if my numbers are really off. But essentially, you could scale that up and go up to like 90 of these things, a 90 Mac Mini M4 clusters, and you could potentially get close to that 60. M4 Mac Mini costs $600 for one. A H200, $20,000. Or I'm sorry, that's an A100. An A200, they charge you by the hour for processing. They're not, for most cases, you're not going to get your hands on. You have to be an X, you have to be an OpenAI, you have to be one of those kind of companies to even purchase it. And so even at 90, that's using an H200 for an entire year, 24/7, nonstop, is something like $20,000, right? Just for usage of the compute, not necessarily owning it. A100s cost anywhere from 10 to 20K a pop. So, versus $600 for a cluster, what is that? That's $54,000 for a 90. And then you own that hardware and you can run at near speeds of what are these big data centers? And without going too much into detail of why the performance is so good for a consumer product, but that just goes to show is that development route, like Andy said, when you force us to go down a certain path, they're gonna do it to adapt, right? So smaller, but just as good or almost as good performance for a fraction of the cost to develop, a fraction of the cost to deploy. I mean, for me, that's super exciting because I want to get a cluster and test it out.
Well, I just want to do the first maybe pushback of 2025 here, which is that I just think something to keep in mind is where this is being developed. And when we talk about costs of running things, I think it's important. And I'm not just singling out this particular news story, but all through 2025, there should always be a deeper look by all of us to say, where is this being developed, and what is the cost of human work? What is the cost of things being done? What's the difference between obviously something like this being developed? Is it all efficiencies? Is it all just that they have worked around the roadblocks that maybe the US has put up as far as sanctions? Perhaps that's part of it. I'm willing to say that. But also there's the human element to it too, which is to say, how is it done at this level? And you could say the same thing about t-shirts made in China and so on and so forth, right? So, but that it doesn't mean AI is excluded from that. So while impressive, I'm also like, okay, but at what cost is this low cost? And what does that mean for everybody else? So just nothing more to add there. Not trying to get on a holier than now and be like, well, this is where I draw the line. Nothing like that. It's just worth mentioning. Also, the other thing I want to mention that I mentioned right before going on air was that I did not confirm this. I have not used the model, but on the same day, December 26th, when this was announced on X, maybe like 6 or 7 down in the thread of it being initially announced, somebody used it and just asked about Tiananmen Square. Not the elephant in the room about Tiananmen Square, literally the Tiananmen Square, the geographic location. And it immediately said it was outside of its scope and asked the user to move on to another topic. So that's interesting too. What is built into the model and what is being restricted from the model? And is that something we should be a little more concerned about? Now, it's open source, so there's probably ways around that if you find that to be the case, because it is open source, but both of those are interesting to me. So it'll be more to come here on DeepSeek and how ultimately effective it is and what kind of impact that means for other people. But your breakdown, Jimmy, was phenomenal as far as cost and what that really means for now getting smaller than enterprise businesses. These are what you just laid out, which was excellent. That could only be touched by enterprises in the last year. I mean, you just wouldn't have the capital or the resources to deploy something like that. But now you could realistically have a small-ish company with a really novel idea that just requires a ton of compute power above and beyond 99.9% of us that would need. And what you're laying out is like, hey, there's a path here. There's a road here that's perhaps achievable, financially. So that's really, really interesting and stuff like that. So I do have a new story if we're ready to pivot, but if we're not.
Oh yeah. I mean, unless Andy, do you have
Well, I just wanted to comment that before any of our listeners go out and buy Mac Minis, what Jimmy was describing, I think, is missing the software to gang that collection of minis together, isn't it?
Oh, no. That's been part of Mac OS for forever. And
you can actually run a model across that many minis.
Oh yeah. Clustering has been around forever. There's tons of open source.
Okay, I've been meaning to go get one, and maybe I'll get 2.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I just want to highlight in this is that when we talk about edge AI and what we were talking about models getting smaller, this feels like edge AI. We just increase the size of the edge, right? Like have 8 clusters, take my edge wherever I need to be, and now I can have this amazing power where I need to employ.
It's funny you say that, Beth. Because there was just another story talking about how now truly Androids and iPhones, this is a different news story, that because now the sort of, as far as we've gotten with the satellites and SpaceX and things like that, that you now truly can potentially use a phone from any point or place on Earth due to the satellite coverage, which is in and itself, that's not a minor news story when you think about that you're no longer quote unquote in a desert anywhere on Earth potentially for getting like an SOS signal or something like that. And that just took me off my other point. I got sidetracked. I went from one news story and sidetracked myself into another news story. What was I going to say? Anyway, I'll pivot on that because it wasn't the news story I was going to bring up. I want to bring up Hugging Face's small agents. Is that how you say it? SMOL? Yeah, well, maybe you could look. I'll briefly intro it, Jumi, and you can jump into it because you sound more excited than I am on this. But I think it's interesting nonetheless. It says today we're launching. This was yesterday. This is published yesterday. So this is news. Today we're launching Small Agents, a very simple library that unlocks agentic capabilities for language models. And then it's like, here's a glimpse, right? So then it's showing you a little bit of it running. But basically, what I get from this is a very efficient, lightweight, very minimal code way for you to actually deploy some things as far as agents. Now, I find this interesting because it says right at the top, it says, what are agents? Now, we talk about this all the time in the show. Like, that's a whack-a-mole moving target. What is agentic capability? What are agents? And this question is going to come up 1,000 times in 2025. But Hugging Face has actually answered it. So I think them having a prominent role in AI right now, I think it's worth just hearing what they have to say. It says, any efficient system using AI will need to provide LLMs some kind of access to the real world. For instance, the possibility to call a search tool to get external information or act on certain programs in order to solve a task. In other words, LLMs should have agency. Agentic programs are the gateway to the outside world for LLMs. AI agents are programs where LLM outputs control the workflow. That is a in bold by itself. AI agents are programs where LLM outputs control the workflow. I think it's a really cool definition and very simple. Any system leveraging LLMs will integrate the LLM outputs into code. The influence of LLM's input on the code workflow is the level of agency of LLMs in the system. I think it's a little wordy there. Note that with this definition, quote, agent is not a discrete 0 or 1 definition. Instead, agency evolves on a continuous spectrum as you give more or less power to the LLM on your workflow. There's a really good definition, really good couple sentences there. Yeah. Somebody put some effort into that. It doesn't say we delve into the, like it feels like a human put some effort into this definition as we continue into the comma, as AI does or whatever. So anyway, just wanted to bring that up. And I was about to say agency. Jimmy, follow up. I'm still working out the cobwebs. Okay.
So
to add to this.
Right. So Brian, you hit the nail on the head there. This is.
I read it.
Yeah,
I did a lot.
But essentially, it's this basic framework functionality that you need to simply and easily put agentic features with whatever model you're doing, right? Whatever model you're using. So it's model agnostic. You can access whatever model you want, but essentially allows you to write the code that you need to implement the result that you're looking for, right? And on the other side of that coin, allows you to access other tools that may already exist or that you may build to bring in to increase the functionality of the call to that AI, right? So think of it as like a dock for your phone or tablet, where it gives you more ports, right? Mm-hmm. You're expanding the capabilities of your core device, and you're connecting it to additional resources, the internet, whatever you need to, by adding in whatever modules. This is the dock that allows you to add those modules. And it's really easy and simple and small, which means it's less resource intensive, which means you can run it on less resource robust systems. And this is all coming back to, weaving to what makes me so excited about far more efficient AI is I really want to run all this stuff on my own hardware, right? And this is one of those things that it's faster for development. I don't have to have additional costs. I can pay essentially a flat fee, and really lowers the barrier if you really want to go into more developing different aspects, not just playing around with it or applying it to your day-to-day workday. So, but to recap, that's what it is. It's just a few lines of code that allow you to connect those capabilities, those features, and it's open source. So I see this as a library that will now be included into larger projects, right? You're going to see, because essentially the way that open source is going to work is you got your core functionality, and then you're bringing in all kinds of libraries, different repos, right? Repositories of information so that you can have a complete set of features to accomplish X, Y, or Z. Right? That's essentially what all that backend stuff is. So by just having this as an open source library that anybody can just plug into their AI project, that goes to the whole edge AI thing, because it's it's less resource intensive. You don't have to have it as part of a larger ecosystem. You can put it on, smaller hardware. You can use this is sort of the, the plugin to make any AI just better, right? One of the things we talk about is how Claude could be so popular, even though it doesn't have web access, right? It's because what it does is really, really good, and people plug it into other features. If they need web access, they'll either do it manually, or they'll go through some other interface like GPT for All or Olama or any of those kinds of things that let you test different models. So, but this small agents, this is why I'm so excited, is because it's a resource that everybody can plug into their projects, and anybody can run it on their own stuff, which I think is democratizing.
Say again, as we wrap that section, say again the name of this object that's available out there, open source.
It's called Small Agents. It essentially means small agents, but in internet speak. So SMOL agents. Right.
Yeah, it's a great article. I tried to share it, by the way, and it did not, whatever reason, I shared it on YouTube, but it did not show up in the comments here. So I don't know if it actually showed up on YouTube or not, but I did share the link. I just can't see it inside our podcast platform for the article. And I highly recommend going to read it because of what I said before about the definitions. I'm not going to get into it now. Go read it. But when to use the agents, when to avoid them. That's the next section on here. And then it goes into coding agents. Introducing small agents, making agents simple. It really, even if you didn't necessarily care about this topic, but you were curious about what's going to be the big driver, why are we going to be talking about agents so much in 2025? This isn't a bad blog to start with, for sure.
Definitely. All right. Does anybody have another story that they want to talk about?
I do.
I do have another one, but I can wait.
I do.
All right, Beth, you got one?
I was wondering if Andy's going to talk about what.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Andy. Sorry. Go ahead, Andy. Yeah.
All right. No, I'll try not to, but I'll weave off of something you said, Beth, about DeepSeek V3, which was that it is a multi-token prediction training system. So instead of just predicting the next token, it does two at a time. Well, Meta just released from their research lab a thing called the large concept model. That moves beyond token level prediction to operate on higher level semantic units called concepts, and just change concept to sentence, because what they really did was they created sentence prediction as opposed to token prediction. That's the basics of it. So they did a large concept model. It's trained to perform autoregressive sentence completion in an embedding space. That's the technical description of their paper that they released. And they did 2.7 trillion tokens of training with this. And they built models around this, scaling so far up to 7 billion parameters. And this kind of model is different now from single token or multi-token prediction, because it's based around graph concept kind of ideas, right? So these are not concepts or sentences that are language dependent even. There's a sort of imagine a world of the concept space that's understood by human intelligence broadly. Well, this is trying to get at that. And it shows really strong performance across all languages, and it outperforms similar sized LLMs. And is really good at summarization and summary expansion. Because it understands the concepts, it can take really sparse representation and blow it up because it's smart because it understands the concepts, not just doing single token prediction.
Well, speaking of Meta, that was my other story, so I'll just hit it really quick. And that's that Meta is going to add millions of AI generated quote unquote users to IG and to Facebook, which is interesting. I think we've seen Meta do things like this before. When you read the article, it talks about how they're trying to appeal to a younger generation. I'm not sure why AI users are appealing to the younger generation, but nonetheless, they're going to have backgrounds and bios, and they're going to interact on the site. And I don't know how this is going to impact that experience. I'm curious to see where this goes, because I feel like Meta has misstepped before. Remember when they did the whole thing with like Tom Brady, but it wasn't Tom Brady, but it was Tom Brady's voice? They probably still exist, and like you can interact with them like characters.ai almost in the messaging thing. I don't even know if that's failed. I should go look on that and see if that has completely gone away. But they paid all these famous people like millions of dollars for their voice rights, but it wasn't them because of all the legalese that went with it. So Meta's done some interesting things in this area, but this idea of, releasing millions, as they say, of these AI users, these avatars into the system, I'm curious to say, like, but to what good? How does this make the user experience better? Is it just going to be like a character AI type thing where now there's somebody who's not real, but they're interested in the same stuff I do? Because unless that character AI is going to be like, hey, I also have a Hyundai Santa Fe, and this is where you find that access panel to fix that damn problem that keeps chirping on your car, I'm not interested. But I'm also looking at it from a 46-year-old viewpoint of Facebook, which is to use the groups and the specialty groups because that's what I use it for. And what's going on in my neighborhood, when were the fireworks last night, that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to me. I'm not going to say that they don't have a great idea here, but like, what does that look like? And ultimately, my question is, how does that make the user experience better? How does that keep people on their platforms longer, which is what they want? I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. I think the plan, or when I hear about this, what it makes me think that their idea is that this is a way to provide more entertainment, right? People like, there's a reason why Twitch exists, Let's Plays exist, is people want to interact, right? People want to create that social kind of interaction. Think of it like sports. Sports is a huge example of a parasocial interaction, right? I mean, you're not on the team, you're not playing the game,
right?
But the collective of being part of the same community and cheering them on and experiencing the whole, the whole event, that's entertainment. That's a way to feel that camaraderie. That's the way to, converse and interact and things like that. So I think that's what they're really creating, is they're creating these characters who can be more interactive with each individual with the power of AI. The limits to influencers and other people that you might meet through a social media account is only one way. Right. It's whatever your connection is, what your experience is, but they don't know who you are. Right. So with that AI in that position, though, they can hold 1 million conversations at once. Right. So they can be that interactive layer for you. Now, is it healthy? Is it go down? That I'm not going to touch. But in terms of why Meta is doing, it's definitely going to. I look at it as it's an entertainment form. Now, being able to separate that, no, this is pure 100% entertainment, not an actual interaction. I need to get my human interactions somewhere else. That's a whole other complication.
Yeah. No, it's no. Right? Because this is, you say entertainment, I say manipulation, right? And the other piece of this, when we talk about the things that are, that have been bounded by that it was too high an effort cost, right? To submit poetry to a poetry newsletter, to submit research papers to academic research journals, right? Those are the sort of things that we're seeing. We did a whole show on it about what doesn't actually have guardrails that aren't, it just took too long and too much resource to do. And like Facebook has already been a place where Facebook and Instagram have already been a place where there have been like bots that are people. They're like Carl talks about it with the rooms with the like a whole wall of iPhones, and then there's somebody like who's doing the conversation with those iPhones, and now you don't need the human in the loop, right? Like I can actually now that's a memory thing. I was going to say I can actually have like a very targeted profile built on Brian now about the things that that you've revealed in whatever place this is. Jen is also offering to search Perplexity for any questions you have about your new acquired vehicle.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you.
But,
yeah.
do I then just keep building a larger dossier of things that you're interested in so that I can shift you slightly in a direction to making a decision that I want you to make that you weren't going to make before that? And what happens in like the psyche of manipulation in this, people get real defensive. I was going to do that, right? Like, or I have hated being on Facebook, and now like I feel like I'm understood. I finally found my people, right? You found your people because that's the algorithm saying, if I make you feel that way, you're going to stay. I mean, that's TikTok's magic. Also, that it gives you new dopamine every video at like a minute and a half.
Like hits. Well, keep you on there
Sorry.
longer. Yes, doesn't. I think it's completely valid, and that's a great point to highlight because, you know, that's their business model. The business model is take the data they gather from you and sell it to advertisers.
Right.
This is a more in-depth and personalized way to do it. In fact, they become the advertisers. These avatars will become the advertiser. It becomes the seller. So, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. Hey, I tried this thing. Oh, you know, we've been talking about this. Oh, yeah. I tried this yada 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 widget. Oh, yeah. I got it for a great deal at xyz.com. Oh, yeah. But it's only on for like the next 2 days.
So you're countering my other cynical take on that, which was they're not actually releasing anything. They're just letting you know they're not going to do anything about the bots that are already on the system. They're just like, yeah, look, there are
better ones.
Tons of lots of things. But no, you're right. The data that they can collect is worth so much more than needing to manage their systems. Okay. I will step down from my...
Well, in my own mind, I think of Meta's research arm as being somewhat distinct from the sort of, let's call it, commercial exploitation of the AI that they're advancing. But it's cautionary tale here. I don't personally find Facebook specifically to be that interesting compared to, say, the informative value of the TikTok short form videos or even Instagram's reels and so on. So I'm not sure exactly how those characters are going to come in there. I thought it was a very interesting point that someone made. It might have been you, Beth, that this announcement from Meta is going after character AI and their profound success. And so maybe in the ecosystem that Meta already offers, you'll be able to, create and engage with previously created characters out there that are AI driven, much as you would on character AI.
Well, they recently bought social.ai. I think it is social. Yeah. So that's where a lot of this is coming from, is that you could interact on social AI. I think I'm looking through the article right now to make sure I'm saying that correct. But regardless, that's what Meta purchased recently. And they're like, yeah, this obviously is having a big impact on this idea and decision to do it. So I think that's interesting. And to your point, Andy, like, to me, it always has been this way. When people are like, I haven't been on Facebook in 20 years. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I do see posts from my friends, but that I've known since college and before, and their moms and dads. And that's important to me too, right? That, like, the social feed, sure, like, for keeping up with people and kids that are growing up and things like that. But to me, the other side of the world really is groups, and always has been. The immense power and value of Facebook groups to me is something that I hope never turns off, because I was joking obviously about the car, but I'm probably in 30 different groups that are all in niches that are important to me in my life in some way. Some of it is about homeschooling. Some of it is about cars I own. Some of it is about my neighborhood, and then subsections of my neighborhood. I mean, there's groups for groups for groups. And what I'm curious about here, just to add to your point, and I know we got to wrap things up here pretty soon, but is just to say, like, well, are they going to interject these new AI characters into groups? And are they going to ask the moderators whether they care or want them in there or not? And so that's where I'm really interested, because if I start having these avatars pop up and they're interacting with the conversation in groups specifically, I have some reservations about that, as I think anybody would. Outside of that, in the normal feeds and stuff, also have reservations about that. But from my perspective, it's not as a big of a, how is this going to change things or whatever? Is it just going to be an AI bot that's like, hey, Brian, I'm responding to your comment because you had this question about the car. I mean, I made up a thing, right? But, like, there's this widget or there's this whistle at your windshield and you're trying to get rid of it. What type of glue are you supposed to use around the windshield to really seal that up to get rid of a whistle? Something like that, right? And now there's the AI bot pop in, this avatar pop in and go, hey, Brian, I'm just responding to your comment. I'm an AI bot, but I see that you have this question. It was actually brought up 2 times prior, both in May and whatever. And there's a really long, good discussion about what the solution is. You might want to go check that. Here's the link to that other subreddit type conversation. Mm-hmm. That's valuable. That happens all the time. People ask the same questions all the time in groups because they don't realize it's been done before. And then you get the really, curmudgeon-y people who are like, use the search, use the search function. So can it be really helpful? Yeah, that would be a really helpful use case. But I'm much more in Beth's, camp on this one with, like, how does it impact the conversation, and does it start to manipulate the conversation in subtle and not so subtle ways? So it's really, really interesting. But we'll see, I guess, right?
Well, to your question, Brian, I'm fairly confident that they will come out with a version of this as an AI moderator.
Yeah.
For your groups.
Yeah. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that helps the moderators, because it is if you've ever talked to moderators, it is a thankless job. It is a thankless job because people are just rough online, as we know. So, anyway. All right. I know we could talk about that forever, but yeah.
Right. Well, I'm just going to open it to the floor if there's any last stories that anybody really wants to cover.
I have 2 quickies. One on the chip side, Cerebras Systems, which you may have heard and may recall, builds what's called a wafer scale engine, and they use a large chip array that's connected directly with a huge amount of memory shuttle built into the chip itself. So their processing speed for any kind of AI is very, very much faster than a typical GPU, which has to shuttle memory from an outboard chip into the processor. It's all kind of contained within the Cerebras system. Okay, so the announcement of Cerebras Systems and Sandia National Laboratories trained a 1 trillion parameter AI model on a single CS3 wafer scale cluster. just one chip. It's this big, right? And they trained a huge model on that to demonstrate the incredible power of that architecture. And the other one that I wanted to mention quickly is that I haven't studied this or done my own research on it, but OpenAI's AI demonstration of O3 and its reasoning capabilities approximating AGI triggered a huge amount of discussion around whether we've actually achieved AGI in O3 behind the lab screen there somewhere in OpenAI. But many experts, including from DeepMind and Hugging Face, noted that I'm quoting here, AI didn't take the test as humans would, but with extensive pre-training. So the test results and the lack of transparency prevent direct comparisons to human capabilities, suggesting the breakthrough of O3 isn't as significant as presented. Against the ARC-AGI test is specifically what they're referring to here. So maybe it's not.
I mean, really, after all, until we get, we really won't know until we get our hands on it, right? So, so it's definitely something to keep an eye out for. If there's nothing else, I've got a really quick one myself, and then let's wrap it up. OpenAI lays out its transition plan to go to for-profit. They want to become a Delaware public benefit corporation, right? So the only really difference broad strokes, I'm sure I'm simplifying it, but the main difference for a benefit corporation is you don't have to maximize profit being number one. And so OpenAI says this will allow us to balance the interests of our investors and our users and, the public and things like that. Let's hope that's the case. Of course, Elon is suing to stop that transition from happening. And, whatever he states, this is obviously one of those situations as let's look at who will benefit from the stopping or the pushing forward of any agenda. But that's about it. I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's always a great time. And I love everyone who takes the time to, chat away and introduce themselves and add new people to the community. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all of our viewers and listeners. And we'll see you on for the rest of the week. We got Thursday and Friday coming up. Before we are halfway through the week already, and it's the beginning of the year. So I hope everybody had a great New Year's Eve and have a great New Year. And we'll see you. Aloha.
Bye. Happy New Year.